Penn Yan, New York, home of the Crooked Lake, Keuka Lake. For decades, families have come here for fun and festivities, but one family remains in folklore, the Gillette family. Legend has it that Matilda Gillette's face appears on this granite. Today, we explore the mythology known in Penn Yan simply as the Lady in Granite.
At this point, it's been almost 60 years since I first heard about it. I was a little kid, I was probably 7 or 8 years old.
I've lived in Penn Yan 64 years. I've been here all my life. First time I heard about the Lady in Granite, I was probably 7 or 8 years old.
The story that's been passed on since about World War II is that the white spot on the black granite memorial stone for the Gillette family is an image of Matilda Gillette that has come back to haunt either her husband or the general public.
And so naturally, you heard about the story, and so I had to go up and look at it.
Of course, being kids, we all had to come up and check it out. If you stood there and you looked at the image on the stone, you could pretty much make out a face on it.
Of course, now I've seen it so many times that I can pick out all the features. I don't know if that's because it's become clearer over the years or because I kind of know what to look for. But it was kind of scary because here's this huge black stone with a mirror polish on it, and there's this thing that's kind of floating under the finish. And of course, I'd already heard it was supposed to be this ghost, and like if you went there at night and what did I hear? If you threw a pop bottle at the stone and it hit the stone, that she would jump off the stone and chase you out of the cemetery. So there was always this idea around the stone that there was a sort of a threat there, that if you went to look at it, especially at night, that you had to be really careful to don't annoy the lady on the stone or you were going to pay.
So since World War II, when this story originated and began to get passed down from person to person, people have tried to figure out what actually happened with this Lady in Granite. The late 1800s for Penn Yan was sort of the quintessential small town upstate New York, mill town. Everyone knew everyone, and really everyone was involved with everyone's life. So the Gillette family was Frank and Matilda Gillette. Frank was definitely a favorite in Penn Yan. He was a dance teacher and a fiddler. They were a close family. They were married for 45 years. They had one daughter. The first story is that Frank and Matilda Gillette had a wonderful, happy marriage for 45 years, and that they vowed that they loved each other so much that when one of them passed away, the other would not move on and find love again. And that when Matilda Gillette died, Frank did go on and find a more attractive and younger wife. The idea is that she came back to haunt him in his life so that he wouldn't be happy with his new wife. This second folklore tale is that Frank and Matilda had a miserable marriage and they hated each other, and that on Matilda's deathbed, she vowed to her husband Frank, who said under his breath at her deathbed, "I can't wait until you're gone," that she would come back and haunt him forever so that he would never be happy. Another version is that Frank was an abusive husband and occasionally would have extramarital indiscretions, and that Matilda vowed that she would haunt him for the rest of his life after she died for all of those indiscretions and the abuse that he bestowed upon her during their marriage.
And so she died, and he buried her, and he put this huge stone on top of her, and what did she do but appeared on the side of the stone?
certainly there have been people who have gone on and tried to ghost hunt in the cemetery and find different things.
At one point, I got real interested and I ran around and did a whole bunch of research about this. And among other things, I had a talk with a gentleman who runs a monument company here in town. And I said, you know about the lady in Granite? Oh yeah, I've seen it 1,000 times. People had asked about it, this and that. I said, what's your take on it? You're a professional. And he said, well, first of all, that particular defect is really quite glaring. Never seen anything that was quite that eye-catching. The other thing is this, as he pointed out, the defect could not have been there when the stone was first placed, or the people would have refused to accept it. So whatever it is that's on there, whether it's just a defect or whether it's a ghost, has appeared since the stone was in place. The way that I've always heard the story is that after the image, defect, whatever you want to call it, was noticed, that the stone was either replaced or refinished 3 times.
And another stone was put in its place, and the spot showed up again.
As far as I know, there's no documentary evidence to support that.
But the fact that folklore doesn't exist in documented form and it's allowed to continue to be told from person to person makes it fun. It's fun to tell ghost stories, and not only is it fun to tell ghost stories and hear those ghost stories, but it's also super fun to actually go to the grave and actually see the lady in Granite.
And of course, over the years, you know, they've always come out with something a little different. You know, if you go up after dark, you can see her moving, and if you stand there long enough, you can see her sit up and turn towards you. This is just curiosity get the best of people. And we've had people come from all over the place. You know, in the evening after sunset, we get a lot of the college kids come in from Kukin around. The cemetery's closed after dark, but people have to, venture up through and check things out.
All the variants of the story that I've ever heard actually don't vary all that much one from another. Probably the most spectacular one that I've ever heard is that if you go up to the cemetery at midnight and you spit at the stone and it hits the stone, that it will strike sparks and the lady will jump down off the stone and chase you out of the cemetery.
So the time that I was there, I was standing in front of the memorial and a car drove up. And out of the car got a couple, probably mid to late 40s. And the couple walked up and stood next to me and the person that I was with. And he really solemnly looked at the stone and looked at his wife, and he said, "There it is." She said, "Wow, I can't believe it." He said, "I haven't seen this in 30 years. He said when he was a kid and was in the camp in Penyan, they told the story and they dared each other to go near the lady in Granite, which again, we've all done as kids, it's fun. The 2 kids he was with, one spit on the grave and the other one kicked the grave. The following day, the one who spit on the grave broke his arm, and the one who kicked the grave broke his leg. I'm not much into stories and hearing myth-type stories, but to have him tell the story seemed very real. So there was a point right there when seeing this spot on the memorial and hearing his story from a total stranger, it almost seemed like a setup. It was so coincidental.
At some point in the past, I knew the fellow who was then the superintendent of the cemetery. And he told me, if somebody took the trouble to go through the village employment records and find out who the various superintendents had been and when they were superintendent, it might be possible to find out when the story originated. If nothing else, one might find out when the mark first appeared on the side of the stone. We
know that Frank Gillette died 6 years prior to Matilda. So all of the stories that say that she came back to haunt him just can't be true. If she's come back to haunt anyone else, we haven't found out what that reason would be yet.
As far as my personal explanation for why there should be all these odd constructions and phenomena and, off-the-wall cults and things like that, in this one tiny little area, I have no explanation for it.
Well, there's, say, a lot of history here. There's different areas, different things, places around the village, in the county even, that, there's just a lot of questions about some of the stuff that's happened.
We don't know if there's something in the water or the air or what, but there's no doubt that it happens.
Yeah, every once in a while you get a little hair raised on the neck, but I've never felt like there was anything here that was going to hurt anybody.
What's interesting about upstate New York is that we have centuries of folklore. All of the Native American tribes that called what we now know upstate New York home for thousands and thousands of years, so much of their spirituality and their way of life was passed down from story to story that now so much of that has been lost. We've tried to figure out what those stories are and piece things together. There's an incredible amount of history that goes into folklore in this area, and so much of it is ensconced in that Native American way of life. So there are certainly other areas in Yates County and even in upstate, central and western New York that people believe to be haunted and spend tons of time searching for ghosts. The Willard Asylum on Seneca Lake is often a really popular spot for people searching for spirits. The other thing that I think adds to the idea of folklore being passed along is the spiritual and religious history of upstate New York. Upstate New York, primarily central and western, are some of the most unique geographical regions in the entire country, if not the world, in terms of religious and spiritual history. So much of that has been passed on from person to person. So much of it we can't explain. Just explaining the fact that the religious history of this region is so unique is sometimes difficult for historians and for ecclesiastic people in general.
If you were putting pins onto a map and tracking this stuff, there'd be an awful lot of pins right around here. So the incidence of this kind of thing is beyond question, and it's even been the subject of books. But so people smarter than me have noticed it, but as far as an explanation, can't help you.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, one question simply remains: has Miss Gillette found peace in the afterlife?